Hi everyone, welcome back to another workshop hosted by the Writing Support Center at Pasadena City College. My name is Genesis. I'm one of the faculty members in the Writing Support Center, and I'm here to talk to you about how to write a scholarship essay, tips for students. So it's scholarship season. I know some scholarships just wrapped up for PCC, but other scholarships from other outside organizations, or maybe at the schools that you're transferring to, have just opened up. And so, we need some tips on how to write a scholarship essay. I know these essays can be very nerve-wracking for a lot of different reasons, but like the main one is definitely because it can help make or break your scholarship. And of course, everyone needs money to help pay for school. So I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to give you some tips on best how to best write a scholarship essay so that you can put forth the best work possible to get some free money to pay for school. So in this presentation, we're going to be talking about what are scholarship essays and why are they important. Some scholarship myths, key items to include in your essay, brainstorming, things to avoid in your essay, and then finally a little brainstorming activity to help you get started on writing a scholarship. Okay, so scholarship essays, what are they and why are they important? So scholarship essays are an opportunity for you to explain why you should receive financial assistance from a school or organization. This is basically supplemental to the informative part of an application. So usually a scholarship application will have two parts. The first part is sort of an informative type of document. You submit the usual information, things such as like your name, where you're from, your GPA, classes you've taken, race and ethnicity, financial earnings, stuff like that. What is your major? So it's very sort of like standard information about yourself. Um, for most scholarships, in most cases, if this was the only thing that a organization or a scholarship committee was looking at, they wouldn't be receiving a lot of information about you. So that's the reason why we have the essay portion, because the essay is an opportunity for the scholarship committee to get to know you on a deeper level, really put some essence behind the application and try to get a sense of who you are and what you value. So that goes into why it's really important, because it's an opportunity for you to talk about yourself outside of what they're getting through the first part of the application. It's kind of similar to to your transfer essays that you might have written when you were applying to your UCs or your private schools. It's really an opportunity for you to show them who you are um, in a different way, because for scholarships, sometimes you'll have an interview, but for other scholarships, you won't have that. So this is really the only chance for you to really tell them who you are and why you need financial assistance to pay for school. Most essays will come with a prompt, and this is again like where you get the opportunity to about yourself holistically and demonstrate why you need financial assistance and how you're going to use the money to support your academics. And I'm going to go into this a little more in detail later on in the PowerPoint, but I really just want to stress that this is an opportunity for you to talk about why you need money to pay for school. Because otherwise you wouldn't be applying, and they want to make sure the organization or the company, the school, whomever, they want to make sure that the money that they're giving away is going to people, to students who really need it. Lastly, scholarship essays can determine whether or not you get a scholarship, especially if the scholarship is really competitive. So as I mentioned earlier, you know, the scholarship essay is really what makes or breaks most applications. You know, like everyone that's submitting an application to a scholarship is, you know, they're usually eligible for the scholarship in some way. You know, if for the everyone has competitive GPAs. um, so you really just want to make sure that uh, you're talking about yourself in a really strong way, so that way they read it and realize, like, yes, this is someone whom we want to give our money to. So with that being said, there are a couple myths regarding scholarship essays. The first one being, I can only get a scholarship if I have a dramatic story. So I've actually served on a few scholarship committees, and I've also mentored students when writing, who were writing scholarship essays. And a lot of the times, when we were trying to brainstorm like what to write about, my students would tell me that they just felt like they didn't have anything interesting. They didn't struggle, quote unquote, struggle a lot. So they didn't really know what they could write about. But honestly, like, depending on the scholarship, it's most likely going to be based on merit, which is like your work and your effort, your financial need, or a combination of these two things. So everyone has their own story that is unique to them. So really try not to focus on what other people are writing about. Don't think that you have to have this very drastic story in order to get selected. While those are enticing to read, sometimes they don't always convey need, or they don't always convey what the company is, what the company or the school is looking for in terms of a scholarship recipient. At the end of the day, they're going to choose someone that aligns with what they value, and they're going to choose the student that they feel best represents them. So don't worry about your story being like dramatic. You know, that doesn't matter. What matters is that you're telling something that's uniquely you, and you're showing who you are and what you value. So really try not to think about other people's stories or what other people could possibly be writing. The second myth is, I won't win any scholarships because I'm not a good writer. So again, that's not true. You don't need to be a poet laureate or a Nobel Prize winner in literature in order to get a scholarship. Um, you know, some students are really great writers, but I've definitely read these really like well-written essays that don't actually tell me anything. They were just really flowery, had a lot of really great metaphors, but at the end of the day, they didn't tell me why they needed the financial aid. They didn't tell me like um, how they reflected the values of the organization I was working for. So there were a lot of key details that were missing. And even though it was a really great written scholarship essay, we gave it to someone else whose style, you know, wasn't my personal style of preference, but they answered the main aspects of the prompt, which at the end of the day is what we're looking for. What matters is that you express why and how the scholarship will benefit you. And again, the organization is going to choose a candidate that best aligns with what they're looking for. So we're definitely looking for quality in the sense of you're answering the prompt and you're demonstrating why and how you're going to use the scholarship money. So style is extra points, but it's definitely not the make or break aspect of whether or not you'll receive a scholarship. So now that we've debunked some of these myths, let's look at Okay, well, if they're looking for certain things in an essay, what are those key elements? So the first one is making sure that you as a student are the focus of the essay. So kind of think about it like if this was a movie, you know, if you were writing a movie about your life, you're obviously going to be the main character because it's about your life. So you want to make sure that you're applying that same concept to your scholarship essay. Um, I've definitely seen sometimes some essays where students get really caught up about talking about how like their parents inspired them or like their parents sacrificed everything to give them to give the student the best opportunities possible, but they spend more time talking about their parents rather than talking about themselves. um, as a reader, as a scholarship reader, I'm going to read that and think, oh, I want to give the money to the parents, but not so much to the applicant. So you really want to make sure that you're putting yourself as the focus, because you know it's your story. You're more than welcome to talk about other people, but you know, kind of look at it as like, you know, in movies, the main character has their supporting have the supporting characters helping move along the main storyline. It's the same concept. You know, you're more than welcome to talk about others, but make sure that you're referring to them more so in like, how did they help you? So if you're gonna reference your parents and how they sacrificed everything to give you the best opportunities, how did you take advantage of that? How are you thanking them for giving you those opportunities? How are you making sure that their efforts aren't being wasted? You know, if you look at it from those perspectives, you're going to talk about yourself, and then that's going to make you a stronger applicant. You want to make sure that your scholarship essay kind of has like a thesis, so a statement that answers the prompt and gives scholarship readers an idea of what you're going to talk about in your essay. And then from there, all of your body paragraphs kind of support that main idea. The main reason I always recommend to have some sort of thesis, no matter what kind of essay you're writing, is just because it helps you stay focused. It can get really easy to just, you know, start writing and then just going on and on. But if you forget what the prompt is asking you, you kind of forget what your main point is. It's really easy for your scholarship essay to kind of just get lost in narrative. So it's always helpful to have this key idea that you can reference whenever you get stuck or whenever you're wondering, do I really need to have this in my essay? Specific language details that make the story unique. So I always say have a story that you want to tell. So rather than just listing all of the things that you did in school and how all of these things show that you're a leader on campus, choose one main story that demonstrates a variety of leadership characteristics and talk about that one story rather than talking about all of these little mini snippets. One telling one story is going to keep the essay more focused. So again, going back to that thesis aspect. And then two, the language and the details are going to be a lot more specific because you're trying to give this one story. So you're retelling this one thing rather than trying to talk about a lot of other um, a lot of other different stories, and you're going to have to shorten those stories, so you're more likely to be general, you're more likely to be using cliches, and that kind of language. It's really easy to just start tuning that language out for so you know, choose one story that answers the prompt and use that as kind of a guiding force, and then you'll be able to have specific language and details to show who you are and again tell your unique story. straight to the point. So even though we're telling a story, we want to make sure that we're getting straight to the point. A lot of scholarship essays have word limits. Um, more competitive and more competitive um, and scholarships that are offering more money are going to have longer essays, but scholarships that maybe are only offering about $500, $200, those might have shorter essays because the value of the scholarship is a little smaller. So you want to be really mindful that you're staying within those word limits. And one of the ways that you can be mindful of that is by getting straight to the point. Going over word limits can cause disqualification. So you want to make sure you're keeping track of like what are the details that are important to include, what's maybe not so important to include, and keeping those in mind and trying to make sure that you're choosing the details that are necessary for your story to make sense. You want it to be creative, but also focus is clear. Creativity, I would say, is part of like style points. So maybe you want to tell it from like a different perspective, or you want to use quotes. Those are all things that are really, really cool to read in a scholarship, but it shouldn't be taking away from the focus. This thesis aspect should always be clear in the essay. Of course, there should be like a logical flow. There should be like a beginning, middle, and end to your scholarship essay, and it should be very clear. So if you need an intro, body paragraphs, conclusion, I think the standard 5-paragraph essay type of model sometimes works really, really well. And so that's definitely something that you can incorporate. And then, of course, most important, surprisingly, this is what I see students forgetting to include the most in their scholarship essays, is the why and how the scholarship will benefit you, the student. At the end of the day, you're applying for someone to to essentially sponsor you. They're financially supporting you in your academic career. They want to know why you need it and how you're planning on using it. And a lot of students actually forget to include this part. And for me, at least for me, this isn't to say every scholarship reader does this, but for me, if I don't see a clear reason as to why the student needs it, they fall lower on my top 10 ranking. So you really want to make sure that you include the why and the how the scholarship is going to benefit you, because that's something that they're really eager to see. Things to avoid. So we talked about the key elements, things that you want to make sure you're including, but there are also some things that you want to avoid in your essay. So again, the use of cliches, unnecessary words, general language, they tend to take away from the creativity of your story. They don't tell you much about the writer, and then it can cause you to go over the word limit because you're sometimes using unnecessary words, or you're just being too general. So then your later sentences are trying to make things more specific. So in a sense, you're kind of overcompensating. So if you're just direct and specific from the start, you can avoid going over your word limits. Again, making someone else the focus of the essay. You can talk about others, but those others should definitely be your supporting characters, because you're the main focus. You're talking about yourself. The scholarship is going to be benefiting you. Providing too much backstory. So because I do encourage giving a story, sometimes there's a need to provide every single detail as to what led to this one moment. Really, you have to look at what is necessary information for the story to make sense. So you don't need to go into this whole lengthy um, backstory, letting us know like every single person that was involved. That's not the information we need. If you're kind of thinking of this as like a novel, we're really just trying to get to like the exciting point, the climax of the story. We don't need the exposition. We don't need like the first 3 chapters. We just need that main part. Restating information that would be in the scholarship application. So for most, unless the prompt is asking you to tell them this information, don't mention your major, don't mention your GPA, those kinds of things. You don't need to say, my name is so-and-so, and I'm applying for this scholarship because XYZ. One, they're going to know, for some scholarships, they are going to know what your name is because your because the informational part of the application will be attached, so they're going to know who this applicant is. Second of all, like, they tend to not want the names because they're also trying to remove any biases. So if a committee is made up of faculty, and if the faculty knows you, they don't want them to, the organization doesn't want them to be bringing in those past experiences that they have with the student. So you want to make sure you just avoid any of those information. And also, it's taking up valuable word space. Every single word is so precious when you have a word limit, that when you add in a sentence of 10 words and that sentence wasn't even needing, that's 10 words that you can use somewhere else. So try not to restate any information that can be found elsewhere in your scholarship application. Again, don't go beyond the word limit, and don't forget the importance of the scholarship. Sometimes, again, just students get so focused on the storytelling, talking about this one exciting moment, talking about others, that they forget to mention why this, they forget to mention why the scholarship is important, why it's necessary, why they're pursuing a higher education. So you want to make sure that you include those details in your scholarship essay. So some brainstorming questions. So now that we know, okay, like, this is what I should be including, this is what I should strive to have in my essay. I want to write a story. The biggest thing comes down to, well, what can I write about, and how do I come up with these ideas? So there's 3 main questions that I think can help you start any scholarship essay. One, make sure that you read the prompt and that you have an understanding of the prompt. You know what it's asking for, so just breaking it down, and getting those details, because every scholarship prompt, they ask for similar things, but sometimes they're worded differently. Some scholarship prompts want you to focus more on leadership. Some scholarship prompts want to hear about you as a student. Other scholarship prompts want to hear about you outside of school. It really just depends on the organization and what they value. So really make sure that you're paying attention to the prompt, because the prompt is everything. But with that being said, there are some questions that you can kind of think about that can be applied to most prompts. So the first one is, what is a goal you want to accomplish in the future, academic or career-wise? How will the scholarship help you achieve this goal? So a lot of scholarship essays want you to think about, what are your big academic career goals, or what are you working towards? And so you want to make sure that you're able to talk about your goals in a way that, you know, reflects either how you got there, what are some challenges you might have faced, um, how do you keep moving forward, and of course, how will the scholarship allow help you achieve this goal. So again, you're bringing back that focus of this scholarship is beneficial to me for this reason. The second question is, what is a difficult situation that you faced that might have made it harder to continue with school? Um, a lot of scholarships like to focus on like what are some of they really want to see um, how you handle tough situations and how you're able to navigate those those tough scenarios. Um, so you want to talk about how did you overcome it. So you know you're really flipping it and looking at it from a positive standpoint. And if it's something that you're currently going through, you know, what is your plan? So it doesn't have to be something that's happened in the past. It could be something that you're going through right now. But just make sure that you talk about like what what is your plan to move forward, to come out of the situation smarter, stronger. And I always say, for these types of questions, I always say like try to have a sort of lesson that you've learned. So for example, if you're writing about how maybe your first semester wasn't really that great, you had a hard time transitioning from high school to college, you know, what is the lesson that you learned? And how are you applying that to future semesters? So maybe you started going to tutoring, maybe you started to create to-do lists, become a little more organized, went to visit professors in your office hours, and this is a practice that you plan on using for the future. You know, you realize that it takes a village to be successful. So whenever you're talking about, you know, what are the difficult situations, always try to include some sort of lesson that you took away and that you're incorporating into the future. And then a final question is like, what inspires you to push forward even when times are tough? Again, they're trying to get to know you. So because the committee wants to get to know you, this includes like, you know, what's moving you forward? What are you striving for? What motivates you when things get tough? So this could be family, this could be friends, you know, chosen family, personal goals, you know. So these are things that these are questions that you can use to kind of start brainstorming and determining what you want to talk about in your scholarship essay. So with that being said, now we're going to go into some brainstorming practice. So I forgot to mention this in the beginning of the workshop. My apologies, but there's actually a supplemental worksheet that goes along with this. So this worksheet is an opportunity for you to uh, put the things that we've learned in this workshop into practice. If your professor is offering extra credit, it also this works as like proof that you watched the workshop and um, you stayed all the way through. So go back to the module, download the worksheet, and come back to the spot, and you'll be able to work on and you'll be able to answer this question. But yeah, so now that I gave you that information hella late, um, so on that worksheet, there's a brainstorming practice activity. This is actually a scholarship prompt from a different school, from Santa Ana College, hence why you see a SAC scholarship in the prompt. But this is one of their prompts. So you're more than welcome to use this as like a way to start practicing how to write a scholarship essay. And this tends to be pretty versatile. So if you end up writing a scholarship essay for practice for this, chances are you'll be able to kind of adjust it, revise it, and submit it for other scholarships for, other organizations that you decide to apply at. So yeah, so the prompt reads, how will a SAC scholarship empower you to continue on your individual journey towards completion of your college education? Please explain how any personal challenges and or opportunities have strengthened your perseverance in attaining your long-term goals. Minimum is 600 words and a maximum of 1,200 words. So again, using the questions from this slide, and you can also use some of the information that we talked about previously, but using the information from this slide, brainstorm some topics that you can discuss in your scholarship essay. Again, read the prompt, kind of think about what are they asking for, sorry. Explaining personal challenges. You're talking about your individual journey. So again, you're talking about you, college education, how have these challenges helped you in achieving your long-term goals? So again, determine which goal do I want to talk about. It's going to be a lot if you're talking a lot about 5 different goals that you have for your life, but think about one main one. Maybe you want to be a doctor. Okay, if you want to be a doctor, what are some of the challenges that you faced, either in your education, personal life, etc. What are the lessons? How did you overcome it? What are the lessons that you learned, and how are you moving forward from that? So, we see how those questions kind of help answer that prompt. Okay. So again, answer it on the worksheet, and then if you're getting extra credit for this, that is proof that you attended this workshop. All right, so some final things to remember. When you're drafting, just write. It can get really easy to start micro editing while you're writing. For some people that works. I know it works for me. But I know for others, trying to micro edit and have the perfect sentence before moving on actually slows them down when they're writing. So just try to get as much out on the page as possible, and then you can always go back and fix it. When revising, again, stay within the word limit. So, when you're revising, that's when you're starting to cut some of the unnecessary words. So, there's some ways to think about how, that's probably one of the hardest things is how do I cut something? Everything's necessary. Not necessarily, think about, are you saying the same thing twice? If you are, take out that second time. Once is more than enough. Stick to one adjective. Adjectives are great descriptors, but you don't need a lot of them in your essay. Are you using 2 or more words when, again, once is enough? Staying concise. Ask yourself if certain details are relevant. Again, we just want to keep it short, sweet, and to the point. Something you can try is like take out the part and maybe ask a friend or a family member, hey, if you just read this, do you still understand what I'm trying to say? And if they say yes, that means that you didn't need the detail that you had taken out. If they say no, maybe we need to find a way to incorporate it in such a way that it doesn't push your word limit over. Again, proofread. You want to make sure that your grammar and your syntax is clear, so that it doesn't affect the understanding of your essay. So while grammar and syntax are not the top of the things to be concerned about. They are important in the sense that confusing grammar can affect the way someone reads it. So we want to make sure it's not affecting the way someone is understanding what you're writing. The Writing Support Center, we offer writing tutoring for content. So if you ever have questions regarding how you're approaching a prompt, whether the story that you're telling is answering the prompt, is explaining why you need a scholarship, our tutors are more than happy to help you with that. So feel free to make an appointment, and I have that information in the next slide. And then, of course, submit it by the deadline. Once that deadline happens, the application is going to be closed. From my understanding, a lot of organizations do not reopen scholarship applications. So you want to make sure that you submit it by the deadline. Pay attention to time zones for those deadlines. Some scholarships close on Eastern time or Central time. I remember I applied for a scholarship to go study abroad, and they were based on Central time. So their deadline was midnight. Their deadline was midnight Central time, but I'm on the West Coast, so I'm Pacific. So that technically meant that my deadline was 10 p.m. because they're 2 hours ahead. So pay attention to those things, because once that deadline closes, once that time hits, it's not going to reopen. And believe you me, they have no sympathy. So make sure that you're submitting by your deadline, and put it in a calendar, put it on your phone, set a reminder. Do not miss those deadlines. Okay, so thank you all for attending. I hope that you have some tips to get started for writing your scholarship essays. Again, you're more than welcome to schedule an appointment with the tutor. We are offering remote tutoring right now. Right here you have the link if you want to set an appointment with someone. We offer tutoring Monday through Thursday from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. and then Fridays from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. All sessions must be booked the day before by 5 p.m. So our system doesn't accept next day appointments after 5. So make sure that you're submitting your requests by then. Unfortunately, we also do not accept same day appointments, and the reason for that is because our tutors are also students. So just like you, they're trying to plan their day out. So we want them to have their schedules for the next day the day before, so that they can organize their own schedules. So just make sure to submit it the day before the day you want an appointment. We have a phone number, so we are answering phone. We are able to assist you if you ever have any questions and you want to call someone because that's your preferred method. You're more than welcome to call this number, and one of our staff members will be able to assist you. So if you have an appointment, you're not really sure how to access it, feel free to call this number and someone will walk you through that. Or if you want to schedule an appointment but you're not really sure how to do it, again, call the number and someone will be able to assist you. And you're also more than welcome to send any questions over to the Writing Support Center at pasadena.edu. Email will take a little longer than a phone call. So if you do have a question, please make sure that it's not super time sensitive, because it can take a while for us to respond to email. Okay. Thank you so much. Please continue to stay safe and stay healthy. Please adhere to social distancing. The state has not reopened, so please stay safe for the sake of you, yourself, and the community. Thank you.